Hi everyone, my name is Jingquan Cai, but I go by Jason. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast. In this podcast, we explore the ideas and ethics behind climate change. I'm currently a sophomore high schooler at Chadwick School in Palos Verdes, California. And my interest in environment actually started way back in 5th grade when I took my first geography class. In that class, we learned how connected everything is from weather to community. And since then, I've been fascinated by environmental science and how people interact with the planet. I started to write about meteorology, debate climate topics, etc. Over time, I realized that climate change isn't just about science or technology. It's also about ethics, what we value, who is affected, and how we make choices as a society. This podcast is my space to talk about those ideas in a relaxed, easy to follow way. So anyone, whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone curious about these kind of topics, can join this conversation. Let's just start with part 1, Introduction to Climate Ethics. When people hear the word climate change, they might think of rising temperatures, melting ice caps, or carbon emissions. But the standard that we can use to evaluate the cause remains unclear. That's when climate ethics comes in. It's the study of how moral principles shape our decisions about the planet. It asks questions like, should rich nations pay more for climate adaptations since they've historically emitted more carbon? And how do we balance human progress with nature itself? Climate ethics isn't just another subtopic of environmental science. It's a lens to relate current issues to our future. It connects economics, technology, and everyday life. And then let's just move on to part 2. Why it matters and how. We're living in a moment where the idea of climate is everywhere. We hear words like net zero, carbon capturing, or sustainability. But what does those really mean on the ethical side? Here's one example. When companies say that they are carbon neutral, what does that imply? Are they actually cutting emissions or paying someone else to work for them? Or think about new technologies like AI. Data center which powers artificial intelligence use enormous amounts of electricity and water. So even though AI might help us understand climate systems or predict disasters, it also raises lots of concerns. Like, are we solving one environmental problem by creating another? And who bears the cost of that energy use? Local communities, ecosystems, or someone else's water supply? These are the kinds of questions climate ethics help us to analyze. Not to blame, but to find smarter, fairer ways to resolve these problems. And then let's just preview the future plans. In this first season, I'll be exploring some key ideas that come from my research in climate justice and environmental ethics. I'll be connected to how governments, cities, and technology shape our reactions to climate change. First, we'll delve into urban and infrastructure climate justice. Cities are often framed as places for innovation and progress, but they also reveal deep inequalities. Like, who gets access to clean airs, green spaces, and flood protection, and who ends up living next to highways, industrial zones, or heat islands. We'll look at how city planning and green developments can unintentionally gentrify neighborhoods, turning eco-friendly projects into the causes for displacement. It's an example of good intentions that don't automatically mean good and fair results. Second, we'll turn to global and structural climate justice. This is about how responsibilities are distributed worldwide. For example, the global north, like the US or EU nations, have historically emitted the most greenhouse gases, while nations in the global south are the ones that suffers the harshest consequence. So how do we create fair solutions that don't just repeat old tragedies and inequalities? We'll explore how international organizations and global finance systems connect to climate justice, and why ethics need to guide policy just as much as science does. Third, we'll revisit AI and environmental responsibility. Artificial intelligence can do lots of heavy work for us, optimizing energy systems, monitor deforestation, and even track emissions. However, it consumes tons of natural resources. Data centers uses water to cool servers, lithium to power batteries, and rare earth metals to make chips. So the big question is, can AI truly be sustainable? Or are we just simply shifting the environmental costs from one area to another? This topic really captures what climate ethics is about, understanding the trade-offs behind innovation. These areas are complex, but my goal is to try to unpack them in a way that's accessible and thought-provoking, connecting scientific research with real-world stories and examples. And then, why did I actually start this project? I think what's missing from many climate discussions is a sense of ownership and empathy. We often talk about the climate change as something happening out there in faraway places, whether it's melting glaciers or distant flood. But climate ethics reminds us that it's relatable to everyone. For me, this project is about getting curious, learning, and realizing that ethics doesn't have to be abstract, since it's actually one of the most practical tools we have for building a livable, fair, and sustainable future. So that's the plan for this podcast, exploring climate ethics from different angles, drawing research with real examples, and sparking critical thinkings about sustainability. If you enjoyed today's short introduction, make sure to follow or subscribe on Spotify or YouTube so you don't miss the next episode. You can also check out my website. That's where I post my climate research blogs, extra resources, and updates about upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening. And until next time, be thoughtful, stay curious, and remember that the future is shaped by the values we choose today.